Welcome back to the Probie to Pro video series. I'm Oakland First Officer David Bristow. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you're somewhat junior like me, or maybe you recently upgraded. So, also like me, you're probably getting a lot of reserve lines. So, let's talk about which contract provisions you need to know to make your life just a little bit easier. First of all, as always, the scheduling handbook is a great resource here. We will get into how the reserve callout order works and your preference selections in another video, but for now we will focus on the basics of being on reserve. Reserve rules are defined in CBA Section 13. The basic reserve day is defined as a RAP, a reserve availability period. This is the time that you must be fit for duty and phone contactable. Our RAPs are limited to 12 hours with an assignability window of 15 hours. This means the period in which scheduling can contact you can last a maximum of 12 hours, but you can be assigned duty that lasts up until 15 hours from the start of the RAP. However, regardless of notification or report time, all assignments must comply with the block and duty limits defined in Contract Section 12 Delta 3. So, for example, AM wraps commonly begin at 0300, at least here on the West Coast. That means you must be available or contactable by phone from 3 a.m. until 3 p.m. However, scheduling can assign a trip that releases as late as 1800 as long as the duty day does not exceed 12 hours, which is the maximum set in Contract Section 12 Delta 3. Put another way, scheduling can call you at 3 a.m. with an assignment that reports at 6 a.m. and releases at 6 p.m. However, regardless of what time they call, you cannot be assigned duty that releases after 6 p.m. on a wrap that starts at 3 a.m. You also would not have to answer the phone after 3 p.m. for a 3 a.m. start. Additionally, our maximum scheduled duty day is 13 hours if there are deadheads, or 12 hours if there are no deadheads. So regardless of when scheduling calls, you must be assigned to be released no later than 12 hours after report time. A side note on contactability. You must remain contactable during a wrap, even if you have already acknowledged an assignment for later that same day. Once you are on a pairing, your second day and beyond are treated like normal line flying, so those work rules would apply. Okay, let's talk about notification. First, what is it? Contractually, notification occurs at the time you acknowledge an assignment electronically via Crew Hub or CWA, or verbally via phone with crew scheduling. Posting an assignment and trip trade giveaway is also considered acknowledgement or notification. Neither a Crew Hub alert nor a voicemail from crew scheduling constitute notification. This will be important later when we talk about short notice callout. Just remember, per the contract, you have 15 minutes to return a call from crew scheduling. If you fail to call them back within 15 minutes, they'll put you down as a no call, no show, and you'll get a call from your chief pilot. Often, you will get a Crew Hub alert prior to wrap start and sometimes the day before. There are some reasons you may want to acknowledge it prior to wrap start and some reasons you may not. But in all cases, it is important to know that you do not have to. The only time you must respond is within 15 minutes after receiving a call from crew scheduling during your wrap. Period. Once notified, you have 2 hours to arrive on airport property for check-in. And Dallas pilots, you get the added bonus of being on call for sim support, so you would have 2 hours to get to the briefing room for a sim event. If you are notified with less than 2 hours to check in, get there as quickly as you can, but go safely. You contractually have 2 hours to report, so do your best to make push, but do so safely. Earlier, I said that there are reasons you may want to acknowledge an assignment before your app starts. One is that if they change your assignment after acknowledgement, you are eligible for leg change override, whereas changes to an assignment you have not yet acknowledged do not trigger LCO. Another reason to acknowledge an assignment outside of a wrap is release to check-in. Remember how earlier I said that you must remain contactable during a wrap even if you have already acknowledged an assignment? Well, that is true unless you are eligible for and select release to check-in. If you select Release to Check-in for a reserve assignment, you are released from the requirement to remain contactable. Basically, the underlying wrap goes away and you are treated like a line holder for that trip. But certain conditions must be met for you to be eligible. First, the number of duty periods in the assignment must be greater than or equal to the number of wraps remaining. If your reserve block has not started yet, you cannot select Release to Check-in until 1200 Herb the day prior to the assignment. If you are currently in a wrap and get an assignment for the following day, you cannot be released until after the end of that current day's wrap. You can't be released to check-in if you are currently in a wrap. Release to check-in can be a really useful tool for commuters especially. Just remember that once you choose Release to check-in, you cannot change that selection. You can give away the assignment if you want to, but you will not get utilization credit if you do. But more on the ramifications of that in the RCO video. Contract Section 13 Mike 3 defines a short notice callout as an assignment that reports less than 2 hours from either notification or wrap start. Short notice callouts trigger premium pay for the first duty period and paid close-in parking or premium rideshare like Uber Black to and from the airport. You will see a check mark in CWA and a box mark, the SWMP, that shows you have short notice callout provisions for that assignment. Again, regardless of the scheduled report time, you have 2 hours from the time of notification to be on airport property. Do your best to make push, but be safe and don't let yourself be rushed by any other crew member or employee. Follow your normal routine, do your flows like you normally do, and make sure you are ready for the before start checklist. All right, a few more notes about reserve assignments. Once you acknowledge a pairing, that is your baseline pairing. Any changes to it will trigger LCO. The scheduling handbook has several great examples of how that applies, starting on page 44 under Reserve Pay. The pay audit on swappa.org under SAC Tools in the Resources tab will also walk you through the pay credit after your trip has been marked audit complete by payroll. Once you return to domicile following your reserve assigned pairing, check your board in CWA or Crew Hub. If you have not been assigned additional flying, you have to stay phone contactable for 8 hours after your report time for that day. So for instance, you're terminating a 2-day assignment in a 3-day reserve block. If you reported at 0400 that morning, you must remain phone contactable until noon, even if you get back to base at 10. If you get back to base at or after 12 and there's no more flying on your board, you're released. If there is no new flying on your board when you block in on the last day of a reserve block, regardless of the time, you are released. If you get back to domicile following a reserve assignment and have a wrap the next day, scheduling can only adjust that wrap by 60 minutes if needed to give you legal rest. So for example, let's say you were on a block of AM wraps that start at 0300. If you were assigned on day 1 for a turn that was delayed for weather and does not return to domicile until 1830, your next wrap could only be pushed to start at 0400, and that would not allow for a 10-hour rest period, and so the following day's wrap would be pulled illegal and paid. Contract Section 13, Sierra, covers your last day in a reserve block. If you are unassigned on the last day of a block, you are automatically released 7 hours after the start of that wrap. Additionally, if you are on an assignment on the last day of your reserve block, you can be released from deadheads back to domicile if you are scheduled to be on duty for more than 7 hours when those deadheads block in at the base. This is a great provision for commuters who can then get released from deadheads home and start making their way home. This is also an important reminder to read and know your contract. If you live in Dallas but are based in Baltimore or Oakland, knowing that you can get released from deadheads at the end of a reserve assignment could get you home hours earlier, since you could commute home from an outstation instead of going back to domicile. We will cover the reserve call-out order and how to set up your pass and flight preferences and more on Release to Check-in in other videos. But that is it for today's episode. Thanks for watching, and please remember to send us your feedback at com@swappa.org. We'll see you next time.